Hello everyone and welcome back to Little Quilter. Today we're going to be working on the Sparrows quilt again. So I last time finished all of the sparrow blocks, so I've got the birds themselves. Now we've got to add on the tail and those last two little flying geese that we're missing here. So before we jump into it, just wanted to mention that this is the Sparrows Quilt kit that I purchased on my own. It's by Pen and Paper Patterns. It is a gorgeous quilt pattern. And if you guys are interested in checking out some of the earlier videos, go ahead and check those out on my YouTube page, or I'll link them somewhere. And then otherwise, let's just go ahead and jump into this and see what we can get done today. Okay, so I've been working for a little bit here and I've got a couple of these finished. Actually ended up messing up and doing them. Basically what I did was I laid them out and then sewed them upside down. I don't think all of the pieces were facing the correct way when I laid them out, unbeknownst to me. It was just kind of how I had set them down whenever I pieced them. So then whenever I went to put these blocks together, well, basically they just weren't facing the right direction, and so a lot of these got put on the wrong way, so had to go back through, pick all of those stitches out, and then lay them back out. So we're going to finish up those blocks, and then we're going to be able to put these bird tail feathers onto the actual bird. Alright, so I'm just going to be ironing these out, and wanted to mention to you guys sort of my trick on knowing that I was sewing these in the right direction, because I did mess up and I had a hard time at, there's just a lot of pieces going on here, right? So you've got these pieces, this solid piece, and then you've got this, which is angled. And so the way that I remembered, and they're going in different directions, right? So half of the birds are facing the right and half of the birds are facing the left. So the way that I remembered I'm doing this correctly, these pieces, specifically these tan pieces, are facing correctly, is that I thought of these as little trees. So if the little tree is standing upright, then we're doing it correctly. And then you just think that your little orange piece here is pointing in the direction that you want it to go. I have decided to fold these seams over like this, and the primary reason for that is I think they will lay down flatter this way than doing open seams, because you've got this corner piece right here, or the center piece. Let me see if I can bring it up here. Right, so this piece right here is just going to be a really bulky seam area, and having it lie nice and flat is just going to help whenever I go to quilt this, that I'm not having to deal with a big bump there. I mean, it's going to be a bulky seam anyways, and we're just trying to minimize that. You know, sometimes that's just how it is. There's a bulky seam and we have to be okay with it. those are things that when you are quilting or when you're sewing your quilt top together, you might want to think about as you're designing it, right? A lot of people go, well, how did you figure out what you were going to do on your long arm quilting machine? How'd you come up with that design? And that actually starts right now. Right now is when I'm thinking, what do I want to do with these pieces? How do I want to section this out? You know, I never completely start designing this until the whole quilt's put together, but it's just somewhere to have to start, so that whenever you sit down, you have a bit of an idea in your head, rather than just going, oh my gosh, what do I do? If you kind of have thought about it along the way, it makes it a lot easier to throw in some designs or some ideas with your quilts. And so that's one of my recommendations, would be to start thinking about it. Now, how does that relate to the seam? It's going to be something I remember right here, that this is that bulky seam. And so whenever I'm designing my quilt and how I'm going to do the quilt top, I'm going to think of, okay, I've got that really bulky seam right here. Do I really want to do something super intricate there or not? And that'll help to sort of guide your ideas a little bit, so that you don't choose something and then go to sit down on your long arm or stand up at your long arm and go, oh gosh, this is not going well, you know, because you've already kind of thought of where are going to be the hiccups in quilting this top. All right, we've got all of the pieces laid out here. I believe we are ready to go ahead and start sewing these onto our birds. So let's pull our birds out. I'm going to set these aside. And now we've got a big old mass of birds. I think we ought to section these out so that every bird is going in the correct direction. All right, everybody, I'm so excited because we're ready to put these together. So I've got all the birds facing one direction. I believe these are actually facing the left. So all the birds facing on the left. We've got our little flying geese flag right here. And now we've got all of these blocks. So we've just got to sew those on there. And then we'll be able to move on to sashing, I believe. But let's just sew these on there, okay? Here we go. All right, everybody. Whole big block done. Now we've just got to iron these little birdies up, and the bird block will be complete. And then we'll be moving on to sashing. All right, everybody, I have completed all of the sparrow blocks. So this is one of the sparrow blocks here, you can see. A lot longer. I guess I'm so used to seeing square quilt blocks, and this is definitely more of a rectangle, so that's kind of a fun change to quilting. So here's one of them. I'll show you a couple of them. I think for the most part they turned out pretty well. I'm really happy with some of these tails. They're really almost spot on there. A few, of course, are not quite as lined up, and that's okay. Another thing I'll say, when I was lining this up initially, I thought, oh, I need to line this little, so I need to line the seams up here, and I also thought I needed to line the seams up here, but that's not true. This seam line across this little bird here does not line up with this block right here, okay? So just take note of that, because initially I thought, gosh, I'm really short on this, and then I thought, well, maybe I'm not supposed to do that, and that's the case. So you want this will end up being a little bit lower than the seam, and that's fine. So really, when I was sewing this block on, the only thing that I matched up were these two half square triangles right here. So that is just something, so that's just something to think about. And we'll do one more, and then I think it's time to lay this out. I don't know if I've cut the sashing yet, so I might have to cut the sashing, but I also took a look at that, and there's no sashing in between the blocks, which is different. I didn't notice that either. So I am excited about that because it means it's going to go together even faster because I don't have to do sashing between the blocks and then at the top and bottom of the blocks. It's only at the top and bottom of the blocks. So now the other thing we'll have to note here is that obviously my color pattern, as you guys have, if you've seen in an earlier video, the colorways for my birds are not the same as the pattern. That's okay. We'll have to kind of look at it and see what we've got. As I sewed these together, my main goal was that I did not match the colors. And so I don't know how many blocks I have of the same colorway versus other ones. So we're just gonna have to lay it out and see what works the best. So let's go ahead and let's lay it out, and then I can work on cutting the fabric for the sashing if I don't have it cut already. All right, everybody, so this is what the layout is looking like with all of the birds. I think it looks pretty good. And I think the color dispersion is pretty good. I mean, I really didn't think about it too much other than basically the beginning part of this is a rotation just to keep me starting with a different color. So you can see up here we start with red, blue, green, brown, red, blue, and then if we'd had more, we would have kept going. But that just kept me starting with a different color so that as I then progressed across each way, I was alternating colors differently. I believe I have at least of one in every color bird head along each column. There are some that repeat because I had a different number of those. Again, if you remember, I really didn't plan out the colorways. I just was sewing them. So I believe some that I can just point out, like I have this little red bird here, similar bird up there, just alternated. So for not really having much of a plan, I think it turned out well. I know somebody had mentioned before that they wanted to be able to see the quilt in more detail, so I'll go ahead and put a picture up that I took of the quilt at this point so that you guys can actually look at it and then see the whole thing without having me moving the camera around. And now the next part is going to be putting the sashing in where all of the carpet is at so that I can get these blocks together. All right, everybody, I have got all of the birds sewn together, and I thought I would just take a moment here because I do feel like sometimes whenever I am this close to being done with a quilt, I almost get kind of frantic, for lack of a better saying. Like I feel like I've got to finish this. Like, I'm so close. I'm almost like, I've just got to keep going. One more thing, I'll be there. And yes, I am close to it, but with all of the ironing, lining everything up, I'm still several hours away from actually finishing this quilt. Maybe some of you are like, wow, you're a really slow quilter, but just all of the sashing to put on there, then go through, iron that, do the next row. So it does take time. So I'm just going to take a moment, not stress myself that I've got to get this finished. You know, I don't know if part of that is just creating content for you guys. But I think I've always felt that as well. Like, I'm just so close. It's like, oh, gotta keep going. And I'm not going to do that. I'm going to take a moment. I'm going to breathe. I'm going to go downstairs, have some pizza, enjoy some time with my husband while my mom's got our kiddo, and just let this marinate. Some people would not have even put this together yet, and that's because they would have laid it out, taken a picture, come back to it, mulled over it, looked at it, see if they wanted to move some blocks around. I did take a picture of it. I kind of looked at it. I think I moved like one block, but for the most part, I was like, you know, I think it looks fine and I'm okay with it. Like we've already talked about, this quilt is for a baby. That baby is not going to be looking at the quilt pattern going, two red birds or two red pieces here or a blue head next to a red wing or any of those things. So I just laid it out, made sure that things were kind of evenly spaced, and I went with it. I've also already cut my 2 inches or so, I think it's 2 inches or so, of sashing that's going to go in between them, and I am actually doing that a little bit differently as well. So the instructions say to like cut it and cut it to size. I didn't do that. I've just sewn all of the strips or width of, all of the 2-inch strips together, and I'm just going to take them, line them up, sew them, and cut at the end of it. And I do that because my piecing is not always exact to the quilt, and so what that helps me do is to just ensure that if one is a 1/4 inch short, I haven't done all of this work to then be a 1/4 inch short on my sashing. So I would rather sew it all together in a strip and then run it across the bottom and just cut where it needs to be. As you can see, I feel like most of the pieces are lining up pretty on point, so I think that part is going to look really good. But I just don't want to take any chances of there being a little bit of wiggle room. I feel like it's so much easier to just cut it at the point, of where that fabric ends and line it up and cut it. So that's what I'm going to do. Okay, so before I end this, and I might come back and try and finish the quilt here after a while, but we'll see, depending on when I need to get this posted. I may not finish this quilt this time around. But my question was, what kind of thread color should I use for this? There's a really dark blue background, and all of those colors of the red and the blue and the green or teal, whatever color you see, foam green maybe that you want to call it, they're just so bright and punchy. And so I was thinking about maybe a light gray color. I think it'll kind of pop a little bit. But just, what are your thoughts? I don't really want to change color threads. You guys know that's not my favorite thing to do, so I'd like to choose an all-over color. I don't think we can do something as dark as navy, because then it's going to be really dark on the birds, but I don't want to do something so light as the seafoam green. Again, I think that's just going to be really bright on that blue fabric, but maybe a light gray or a semi-medium tone gray. I don't know. You guys think about it. Let me know what you think. Alright everybody, well, I hope that you have enjoyed this part of making the Sparrow Quilt by Pen and Paper pattern, and I look forward to finishing this quilt up next time. Y'all have a wonderful day, and we'll see you then. Thanks.